My name is Phyllis Wrestler Goldblatt, and I'm a child of survivors. I was born in a displaced persons camp in Bamberg, Germany in 1946. Now you all know my age. All my life, I have been an avid reader, even as a young girl, and I was always drawn to stories of the Holocaust. I guess it was less painful to read than to hear my family recount the horrors they endured. But every time my mom saw me reading my novels, she would say, "Why are you reading these Bummermeises?" When every survivor has their own true story to tell. Before I begin the extraordinary tale of my mother's survival, I want to emphasize that each survivor has their own remarkable story of escape. Each one deserves to be heard and retold, lest the world forgets. We just finished retelling the story of our escape from Egypt over 3,000 years ago. The Holocaust was not even 80 years ago, and already we are challenged by the uneducated and the deniers. In these times of increased hatred and anti-Semitism, it is our responsibility to listen, retell, and never forget. As my mom lay in the hospital in her final days, she took my hand and said, "Phyllis'll," in the old days it used to be Fagala, "please keep telling my story." So I would like to take this day of Shoah remembrance to thank Hadassah, the Shoah Committee, and this amazing Glen Eagles community for allowing me this opportunity to help me fulfill my mom's last wish. I want to begin this travail in 1995. My mom was spending the winter at Kings Point. Her friend in Boca was suffering from late-stage Parkinson's, and she paid her a visit. The friend, also a survivor, had a Polish woman as an aide. My mom was also from Poland. They immediately started a conversation. My mom recognized her accent as also being from Galicia, and so she asked her where she was from. The aide mentioned the neighboring village to my mom. The aide, named Wanda, said my father-in-law helped Jews escape. To herself, my mom poo-pooed her claim, because today many Poles claim to have helped so many of our people. So where are they? My mom asked Wanda, "What was your father-in-law's name?" "Vladik," she replied. With that, my mom froze. That was the man who made my mom her false con or ID card. And so began a relationship between my mother and Wanda. We helped bring her children to the United States and helped settle them in Chicago, where they already had acquaintances. My mom grew up in a village near Rzeszów, Poland, with her mother, father, and brother. My grandfather owned a flour mill, supplying flour to nearby villages, often extending credit when a customer fell on hard times. In September 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland, my mom was 14 years old and her brother was 16. Her mom, my grandmother, was already ill from pneumonia at a time medical care for Jews was forbidden. My mom tore off her armband in search of a doctor or a pharmacy, but she was apprehended by authorities and thrown into a filthy, disgusting jail, rampant with insects and rats. She cried for 3 days and 3 nights until my grandfather used some influence and money to find her and have her released. But my grandmother died days later. Shortly after that, the Jews were ordered to evacuate their homes and move into a ghetto. My grandfather said, no, we're not doing that. We will never come out of this alive. And so he told his 2 children, we have to run, we have to hide, and we must each go our own way. If they catch us together, we'll all be killed. Separately, maybe one of us will survive to tell the world what happened here. And they each went their own way. My mother's brother went into the woods and found a group of partisans. At that time, the partisans wouldn't accept girls. My mother didn't know what happened to her father. Can any of you imagine a time like that? Asking your teenage children or grandchildren to find their own way in a world in which they were hunted like animals? My mom stayed close to home, hiding among the weeds on the bank of the river which powered her father's mill. One night she heard rustling among the weeds. There was another family there. Looking for the comfort of other people, she moved closer, but then a child started to cry. She realized the danger and moved farther down along the river. Within hours, she heard boots, dogs, and a machete whipping through the weeds. The Nazis grabbed the young family and shot them on the spot. Miraculously, my mother went undetected, but she was hungry, alone, and scared. So she took a chance and went to her Polish neighbor's house, a family with whom she had been friendly. They had children her own age. They gave her a meal, some bread, and hid her between the planks of their barn. And that is how she lived for about a year. Soon rumors circulated that they were hiding a Jewish girl. The Nazis were searching for her, came to the barn, and with a pitchfork stabbed the planks where my mom was hiding. Suddenly, a cow lay down right in front of where my mom was, and so she escaped a certain death. But the experience frightened the neighbors, and they said they could no longer hide her and jeopardize their own family's lives. However, they did know Vladik, the father-in-law of the aide in Boca, and arranged to have a fake ID made for her. She now had a new name, came from a different city, had to learn about the town, the neighbors, the stores there, and so forth, in case she was ever caught and interrogated. She was also now a Catholic Pole. Alone, hiding by day, walking at night through fields and forests, she tried to find the partisans, but to no avail. She existed, eating raw potatoes, parsnips, and whatever else she could steal while on the run. In addition to her fear, loneliness was her only companion. She often wished she had a friend, a sister, or even an inmate to talk to, but she only had cornstalks with whom to share her misery. Eventually, she had the courage to approach a house about 20 kilometers from her home. She begged for a job, anything, working in the fields, housekeeping in their home. She worked hard there for a couple of years, until one day the owner approached her and said, "People around here have seen you and they think you might be a Jew." My mother vehemently denied these allegations. The owner assured her that if she was truly not Jewish, she had nothing to fear. He was calling the Gestapo and they would find out the truth. In the middle of the night, there was banging on the door, and my mom saw the repulsive German uniforms. That's it, my mom thought. I tried hard, but now I'm dead. They dragged her out of the house, slapped her around a little as the homeowner looked on. They pulled her a distance from the house as her knees were buckling and she was trembling. And they said to her, "Don't be scared. We're not the Gestapo. We're the partisans. We heard you're in trouble. They're coming for you in the morning." They hid her in bales of hay as a horse and wagon drove another 20 kilometers farther again, gave her a new ID, and found her another job. She again worked in the house and in their fields. Once a week, a German officer would show up to make sure the farmer was turning over most of his crop. By this time, my mom was a pretty 17-year-old girl, and the officer about 19 or 20. He was always a little flirtatious, asking her out, but my mom always turned down his advances. One day, he started humming Hatikva. Still, my mom was too wary to fall for any kind of trick. and then one day he simply never showed up again. Life was pretty good for a while. The family was nice, she ate well, but she thought she was the only Jewish person left alive. She went to church every Sunday, fearful of not knowing the prayers. How would she cross herself? Take communion? What was she supposed to do with that cracker? And what would she say at confession, where it seemed to her the world had so much more to confess? She kept a journal through her years in hiding, expressing the fruitlessness of this whole charade. To be the only Jewish person left alive, having to marry a Pole, having Christian children, is that the future? One day there's knocking at the door. As she answers the door, there is an old beggar in front of her. She looks again, and there is the face of her father. Just by chance, he wandered into the house where my mom was working, about 40 kilometers or 25 miles from their original village. The woman of the house came to the door. "What's going on here?" My mom couldn't cry or show any emotion. She just went to her room. But her dad, the beggar, began to sob. He told the woman it's Easter and he's homeless. He would work the fields for free just for a place to sleep and a little food. She gave him shelter in the barn and some bread each day. My mother and grandfather survived the rest of the war, rarely exchanging as much as a glance for fear of being found out. After liberation, this family was shocked, both that they were father and daughter and that they were Jewish. They said, "Of course we would have helped you." But how do you know? Who could you trust? My grandfather and mother made their way to Germany, where the United Nations set up refugee camps. My parents met there, married, lived there for a year, and had a baby while trying to ascertain passage to the United States. You are looking at only a part of that result. In 1993, upon my son's law school graduation, he asked to take a trip back to Poland with his grandparents. At first, my mom was adamantly against such a trip. Why would I want to go back to a country whose earth is steeped in Jewish blood? But capitulating to my son, we embarked on the most awesome trip imagined. We found the family that initially hid my mother. They immediately remembered her. "Ruchcha," they screamed. "Is that really you?" They put my son between the planks in the barn where they hid my mom. He couldn't bear more than 10 minutes. We all shared so many more unbelievable experiences on this trip, but I know I have to wind this down. I want to end by saying, when I saw my son argue a case in front of the United States Supreme Court, my heart was bursting with pride. However, my thoughts were with my mom and all the miracles she endured to make this day possible. And to all those less fortunate who did not survive, I may not know your names, but I know your souls, and you shall never be forgotten. My son, daughter, and 4 grandchildren represent the 3rd and 4th generations of the Holocaust. It is my hope they cherish this legacy and continue to tell my mom's story. And I implore all of you to ensure your future generations to never forget. Thank you.